is Doug Fuller speaking. Thank you for joining the Washtenaw County Road Commission for our July the 21st virtual working session. Before we start the session, there are a few housekeeping items I would like to cover. Just a second. There we go. Number one, if you would like to make public comment during this meeting, we will prompt you at the appropriate time in the agenda to virtually raise your hand. If you are viewing the meeting on your computer, first make sure to click Join Audio. You can then raise your hand by clicking the Participants button at the bottom of your screen and then the Raised Hand button at the bottom right of your screen. If you dialed into the meeting from your touch-tone phone, you can virtually raise your hand by pressing *9. Once we get to the public comment section on the agenda, we will unmute participants with raised hands one at a time. The chat feature on this Zoom meeting is available only as a technical support for users on their computer or smartphone. If you are experiencing technical issues with audio or video during the meeting, submit a comment in the chat feature and our IT manager, Chris Quinter, will help you troubleshoot. The audio and video of this meeting is being recorded. A link to the video will be posted to wcroads.org in the coming days. Today's meeting agenda is posted on wcroads.org, and there is a link available in the chat if you are joining us from your computer. The agenda calls for a closed session discussion on the topics listed on the agenda. When we get to that point in the agenda, I will make an announcement. The meeting is now called to order, and I will start by asking for a roll call to identify commissioners and directors of the commission. Currently speaking is Chair Doug Fuller. Vice Chair Barb Fuller, are you there?
Present.
Thank you. Member Green, Rod? Member Yamas?
Present.
Thank you. Good morning. Member McCollum?
Present.
Thank you, and good morning. Managing Director, Ms. Siddell.
Here.
County Highway Engineer, Mr. McDonnell.
Here.
Director of Operations, Mr. Harmon.
Present.
Director of Finance and IT, Mr. Ackerman. Daniel? We are now at public participation, and we come to public comment. If you would like to make a public comment, please virtually raise your hand now. If you are viewing the meeting on your computer, first make sure to click Join Audio. You can then raise your hand by clicking the Participants button at the bottom of your screen and then the Raised Hand button at the bottom right of your screen. If you dialed into the meeting from your touch-tone phone, you can raise your hand virtually by dialing *9. The meeting host will unmute participants with raised hands one at a time. The host will announce your name or the last 4 digits of your phone number when it is your turn to speak. As with all of our meetings, while this is a time to receive comments from the public, this is not intended to be a period for dialogue. Each person will be allocated 3 minutes to address the board. Emily, do we have such people that would like to address us?
We do. We have user ending in 3626. They have raised their hand. I'm going to ask them to unmute.
Emily, could you say the name again?
The username ends in 3626. So we'll ask them to share their name. I believe they are unmuted now. Go ahead.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. My name is Bill Vandermeulen. I live at 2562 Blueberry Lane here in Scioto Township. I'm coming here to ask for your guys' help. I live on a road, if you guys are familiar with it, it's a dirt road and it's severely stressed. I've had it put in writing by Bill Stein that it's basically considered a ditch. You guys have come out a couple times and dug out the road, which is great, in front of my house to reestablish the drainage area, and I really appreciate it. The guys are always professional and they do a great job. The problem is much broader than that. The good work that was done on Craig Road, which is just to the south of my property, has necessarily put more of a strain on Blueberry Lane, because now that Craig Road is draining properly, more water is coming down in front of my house. I've sent a video to Emily earlier this morning that I'm hoping she's been able to distribute for you guys to look at, that gives you a pretty good indication of how concerned I am. I'm afraid I'm going to lose the bottom part of my driveway because the water is so intense coming down, it's overflowing the pipe. I've done everything possible. I hired a pond company that dug out a side of my property that goes 8 foot down to relieve the water. But the problem is that when the road commission comes down and levels out the road goes down, the water goes up, and the barrier between my property line and the street is getting lower and lower, and that's really causing a problem. It's not my property that's the issue, it's the road itself hasn't been properly maintained for a long time. So what I've done is I've gone to Scioto Township and I've asked them for help. They've sent me to the road commission. I've gone to the road commission for help. They've sent me back to Scioto Township. So I'm coming to you guys directly with the video and saying, I really need you guys to help and get the road to be, so that it drains properly and that it's dug out properly on both sides. I've explored the possibility of getting the road paved, and that's an incredibly expensive demand on the residents here with the 10-year moratorium. Most of my neighbors are past 70 years old. They don't want to do that. They feel that the road is, we're taxpayers, and that it ultimately falls on the road commission to maintain the road. I've asked for what the difference was between Craig Road and Blueberry Lane, and apparently there's a different designation for Craig Road versus Blueberry. So all of these things, I've never done this before. I've never gone in front of any commission anywhere for anything, but I'm kind of at the end of my rope about what to do next, and I'm open to advice, counsel, suggestions further on what I can do to make it better for my property, but more importantly, make it better for the road in general. Because as you can see from the video, it's just flowing down and basically overrunning the property line. Excuse me, and I don't believe that that's the way it's supposed to be. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Bill. And just to confirm, your address is 2562 Blueberry Lane?
Yes, I am curious. I know it's not a dialogue portion, but have you guys had a chance to look at the video? Did it make it through, Emily?
Bill, we did receive your video, and I will forward it to the board and directors after this meeting.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Emily, could you, or could the gentleman please give me your name again, because I didn't get a chance to get it down.
Sure. My name is Bill Vandermeulen, V-A-N-D-E-R, capital M-E-U-L-E-N.
Thank you, Mr. Vandermeulen. Bill, we don't really have a prescribed set pattern. However, I will ask at this point that the managing director contact you probably tomorrow, because we have a full day of meetings today, to what the steps would be that we recommend.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that, because, every suggestion that the county, that when the local guys have come by, I've followed. I mean, I'm just trying to solve problems. And the county guys, we've lived here for 15 years. The county has been out twice to dig out the trench in front of the road, in front of my house. They did it last year in November. And unfortunately, the road now is deteriorated to the point that with between the winter snows and the spring rains, it's completely filled up again on the south side of the property. So all of that work that was done to let the water sort of drain correctly on the south side, it just flows over again. And I'm just trying to protect my property and stop it from potentially costing me thousands of dollars in repair bills on my driveway. It's already cost me a couple $1,000 to put in the pond, which was actually a great help because it did allow for the water to drain into about an 8-foot, an 8-foot area. But that's just temporary. Eventually the same problem is going to occur.
And just in my own, I live in Scioto Township myself, and I'm basically familiar with Bluebird and Craig, but I just want to confirm that your address is west of Maple.
Yes, I am in Scioto Township.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, sir. That may be your first presentation in front of a public board, but you should run for office because that was clear, concise, and easy to follow.
I appreciate that. I try to live by the motto of be good, be brief, and be gone.
That's very good. Can I use that later?
Absolutely.
Okay,
it was borrowed from a mentor of mine a long time ago. So yeah.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, sir. Emily, do we have anyone else that would like to address our board this morning?
At this time, Commissioner, I don't see anybody else with a raised hand.
Thank you.
And I do want to note, I'm sorry, Commissioner, Dan Ackerman is here and Commissioner Green is also here.
Okay, good. I knew Dan was here because I chatted with him earlier this morning. So, Daniel, you're up.
All right, Cheryl, any introduction or should we just get right into it?
I don't think you need any introduction, Dan. You can hop right in.
All right. So we do have a PowerPoint presentation to display.
Wait, I think Doug's trying to say
Okay,
something.
Dan,
Sorry,
if
Doug.
you wouldn't mind, for those of you that may be watching and are not part of the road commission itself, the person I'm talking to is Dan Ackerman, who is our director of finance. And that concludes my comments. Dan, please go ahead.
So commissioners, we do have a PowerPoint presentation that I will try to do as good a job I can summarizing things. As I always have stated, if you have questions, feel free at any time to ask. We just thought, especially given this online format, that a PowerPoint presentation might be the best way to go over the budget. Okay, Emily, we can go to the next page, please. Okay, so our Michigan Transportation Funds, we've certainly spent a lot of time discussing that and the challenge of the COVID-19 stay home, stay safe. In the first quarter, we did reduce what we were expecting to receive from the Michigan Transportation Funds, the gas tax, license, and registration fees. We reduced that by about $3 million. Certainly in May, we saw that's when the April stay-at-home, stay-safe really hit us. We were down about 30% from May of 2019. We are hopeful that that will change starting with the June receipts. At this time, we don't feel we need to make any further adjustments. Certainly if situations were to worsen and so on, all bets are off, but the projections we received from the state of Michigan, we feel that the $3 million was enough of a reduction at this time.
Based on what we know today.
Based on what we know today, obviously, things seem to be changing every day. But yeah, at this point in time, we feel like we are good as far as the Michigan Transportation Funds. Any questions on that at all? Okay, next page. So with regards to our revenues, the operations department was successful in obtaining a grant from the state of Michigan for some of our salt storage shed repairs. And the amount of the grant is about $25,000, which would be an increase to our revenues. There is a match for the road commission, And the total project itself is about $75,000. And Jim, as far as the timing, was this something that needed to be done prior to the end of September?
Yes.
Okay, so certainly time is of the essence on this, but some much needed repairs. Jim, would you mind sharing the types of repairs that are included with this?
Or includes using our buildings and grounds crew, staining, painting the outside lower portions of our wooden salt barns to protect that exterior wood from further deterioration. It includes the construction of an expanded concrete approach to the entrance of the barn at Manchester. Finding the approach that was built back in 2011 is too small and causing some erosion and issues with the gravel surface out there. So MDOT was kind enough to share in the construction of an expanded concrete approach. It would include the removal of the higher energy use high bay overhead lighting in the wooden barns and replacing that with LED and also motion detectors. So that'll significantly reduce our energy consumption and improve our lighting for that matter in those wooden barns. So that would be at Chelsea, Manchester, and the Southeast Service Center barns. This program, historically that MDOT has availed, would provide for the construction of new salt barns. The dollar amount is inadequate statewide for that purpose. So what they've done is put out a statewide grant funding for maintenance and repair and some minor improvements, as I described, for contract counties across the state. So we were grateful to receive the approval. We're working through the administrative paperwork right now. This would be part of our state trunk line contract and specifically a transportation work authorization. This is a special grant funding that MDOT provides to contract counties.
And Jim, just to be clear, it does not include the salt building on Zeeb Road, correct?
This does not involve any work to the dome here at the main yard. That's an entirely different conversation, and this funding would not apply to that facility.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Jim. Appreciate it. Another large adjustment we made is for the expanded township agreement program. The operations department, again, successful in partnering with our townships, and the total investment, both road commission and townships, is about $6.5 million, which is nothing to sneeze at. And so again, I think that just shows the townships believe in what we're doing, and that's been a really successful partnership. So definitely kudos to operations for the expansion of the township agreement program, which is something that continues to happen every year that I've been here. So next page, please. So we had a few departmental increases. Obviously, the county board expanded our commissioners, and so we just need to account for the wages for primarily the second half of the year. So that's about a $10,000 increase to the administrative department. There's been a lot of repairs and maintenance that we've had to do, some larger projects, again, involving the operations department. And so that line item needs to be increased by about $75,000 in order to make sure we don't go over budget for the rest of the year. And also we need to increase our non-departmental department by $20,000. And this is for all the COVID-19 related costs. Hand sanitizers, PPE, there's signage that we've been purchasing as well. Certainly unbudgeted, of course. And we are currently seeking FEMA reimbursement for that. As a matter of fact, I talked to one of the FEMA agents that's assigned to the road commission yesterday. Initially, she said there are 4 FEMA agents, which I was excited to hear, but the 4 FEMA agents are for the entire state of Michigan, so they're going to be very busy. But I have a good contact with FEMA. They're going to walk us through all the paperwork. We're kind of collecting the cost right now to see if we just want to have one submittal or if we want to have several, depending on what costs we think are coming. And it looks like FEMA will go through a lot of analysis, and sometimes they throw some of our costs out, or they make adjustments. But basically they would pay for about 75% of our costs. But as of now, I have no idea to know what number that is in order to adjust the budget. So conservatively, we're holding off adjusting our revenues until we get a little further along in the process. Okay, next page. A couple other increases that we had. There are a few culvert projects, the Swift Run Drain, which is about $150,000, and Dennison Road, about $110,000. Matt, I don't know if you want to make any comments about why the need to include these projects?
Yeah, ultimately, as part of our culvert and bridge inspections, we've done various inspections, and Dennison Road is currently closed. We'd look to rehabilitate that culvert and get the road reopened. So that project is a rehab rather than a replacement. And then the Swift Run is a culvert in Ann Arbor Township that we're working with the Water Resource Office on. That's our portion of the replacement costs. So.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. Another increase is for the technology that was provided to the commissioners. That's about $9,000, primarily the laptops, which is how the commissioners can do this remotely, like we've been doing, has allowed IT to support all of you. But we just want to make sure that we account for that in the budget. Next page, please. So summing up the 2020 adjustments, it was about an additional $1.4 million decrease to our fund balance. And so our projected fund balance after this would be about $16.4 million for 2020, which is about 22% of our expenditures. Keep in mind, Plant Moran said our targets fund balance as a percentage of expenditures should be about 15 to 25%. Well, certainly that's right. That's all within the target range that Plant Moran has where we should be. I don't know if there's any questions specifically about 2020. If not, then we'll talk a little bit about, we'll get our crystal ball out and talk about 2021 and 2022. Emily, if you can go to the next page. So the state of Michigan has released Michigan Transportation Fund projections for the out years. We took those projections and conservatively modified those down a little bit because I think they're being a little optimistic. But using the projections, the Michigan Transportation Fund projections from the state, our 2021 projected fund balance would be about 11.1 million. And 2022, the projected fund balance would be about 8.2 million. And it's important to note that we have all the federal aid and non-federal aid projects that staff would like to include at this point. We have all pension and OPEB, the other post-employment benefit payments included, including there's some additional suggested amounts. Again, these are just recommended. We don't have to make these payments, but those are all included. We also have $4 million for our road equipment for each year. And why is that important? If situations were to worsen, then there are some areas we could look at to potentially reduce our federal aid program or non-federal aid program. If we didn't feel we could make those additional pension or OPEB payments, if we had to look at our road equipment or any combination of those. So again, the fact that with everything included, we would be at $8.2 million fund balance at the end of 2022. But there is potential if situations were to worsen and we had to make changes. So I believe that the entire management team feels fairly comfortable with the numbers and where they look. And again, this is at this point in time, things can change. Looking into 2022, the further out we go, the more assumptions we make, of course. But with all the knowns now, this is where staff thinks that we will be at the end of 2022. So I don't know if there's any questions or comments.
I have a question.
Yes.
Dan, understanding these are all projections, I understand
Yes.
that.
Hmm?
What percentage of our expenditures do these fund balances for 21 and 22 represent? Since
So-
we're at, what did you say, 22% for 16.4?
Mhm.
What do these other ones represent?
So Barb, I forget 2021, but 2022, I believe, was about 13%.
Okay.
So again, slightly lower than what Plant Moran has recommended. But again, you know, even 2020, we feel our conservative numbers, we feel that we can get closer to a balanced budget by the end of the year. You know, you know, the revenues we project, I think they'll come in slightly better than we projected, and expenditures slightly under. So, you know, you've been through the budgeting process with us a few times now, and you understand, and you probably hopefully have seen that you know, we have a conservative approach, not ultra conservative, of course, but a fairly conservative approach. So I think in 2020, you know, again, assuming situations don't worsen, you know, I think we can come out better than what we projected. And, you know, 2022, 8.2 million, 13% of expenditures, you know, would we like it to be at 25%? Of course we would. But we also, you know, there's a lot of things we want to try and accomplish as an organization. And given all that, I feel comfortable with all this, with the caveat that there are things, if we need to, we could revise if we had to.
Sure. So what does the 11.1 represent?
That's at the end of 2021. I believe it's about 15%, Barb.
Okay.
About 17%, Dan.
Is it 17? Okay, thanks, Cheryl.
Okay.
So that percentage is decreasing.
Right.
Yep.
I'm not being critical. I just feel a responsibility to be mindful of this. And I do trust completely on the managing director and her senior staff to bird dog this very closely and make responsible decisions and recommendations. So please don't misunderstand the reason for my question.
No, it's a good one, Barb. I mean, you need to make sure you have plenty of fund balance. Emergencies could come up. You know, obviously we're in this COVID situation right now. So you definitely want to make sure that that percentage isn't zero, because inevitably emergencies come up and you need that fund balance, you need that cash in order to address it. So certainly staff is mindful of that as well. And, you know, it is a good question, but again, while 13% isn't 25%, I still feel fairly comfortable knowing the fact that it's a couple years out, and that there's also several things that we could fall back on if we had to, if we were uncomfortable with where we were heading.
Yeah, I feel that this was an important exercise to go through as we look at not only where we think we're going to come out of 2020, but looking ahead to 2021 and 2022. Many of our projects and our purchasing of equipment have incredibly long lead times right now. So we are already in the design phases for many of the construction projects, not just for 2021, but also looking ahead to 2022. That also may involve things like right-of-way acquisitions. So there's expenditures that this organization would be making that if we're going to make those now, they need to be good investments looking towards the future. And we certainly don't want to jeopardize any of those projects. Those are the harder things to turn around or to say yes or no to on a very quick time frame. Same with the equipment. As we said, we'd be still hoping to maintain that $4 million investment in road equipment. That's another area where we have dug ourselves a really large hole over time, and we've been slowly clawing our way out. But with the type of equipment that we have been ordering, there is often a 12 to 18 month lag time from when we place the order for that equipment to when we would take possession of it. So we need to make sure that we're comfortable from a budgeting standpoint that we can tolerate that. If we need to cut back, we certainly could. The preference would not to be to do that, because by having that steady investment, at least we can continue to do the work that we need to do. That gets to how we do our daily operations. But those are exactly the things that we're looking at and saying, if we continue to have the level of expenditure that we would anticipate having for the next 2.5 years, Does the budget support that? And do we still have an adequate fund balance that, heaven forbid, another emergency, just like the one that we've been going through, and this is not a short-term emergency, that we're going to be able to get through from a budget standpoint and still handle the occasional culvert issue that may come up or some other project that we may need to address on a relatively short-term basis. So I was very appreciative that staff came together the way they did to go through this exercise. And we wanted the board to be aware of sort of where this is taking us. Again, I think it is a conservative estimate on each of the years, both closing out this year and for the next 2 years. But I would prefer to go through it on a slightly conservative basis than to all of a sudden have some very large surprises and to be making some pretty deep cuts in the next 2 years.
Or also have a, go ahead, Rod.
Sure. What is the average lifespan of the road equipment?
Jim, I can hand that over to you. I think we've been trying, 10 years has been the longest we've been trying to hang on to things, although we certainly have things in our fleet that are older than that. And when I say that, I'm talking about the typical truck.
Thank you.
Jim, do you want to answer that?
Rod, are you, so I understand your question.
Right.
Are you asking the lifespan of the existing equipment or the replacement cycle for the equipment?
Well, I guess I mean the lifespan of the existing equipment, but I mean, I'm looking at that $4 million annual investment. So I know that you're doing what you can to make sure that all of our equipment is up to par. So I'm just kind of wondering, when we buy a new truck, say, we can expect it to last, what, about 10 years?
Correct. I'll use the heavy truck because that's such a big ticket item, and that can take about a year to 14 months to take delivery of.
Right.
From the point of order, as Cheryl said. First of all, a new heavy truck, fully outfitted, Rod, is $285,000 for one.
Right.
The last few years, we've been buying 4, so it's roughly 1.1 million, 1.2 million total cost. We would like that vehicle is fully depreciated in 5 years based on our accounting standards. We'd like to replace it at 10 years or 100,000 miles of use, whatever comes first. When we get to lifespan, many of our heavy trucks have 200,000 miles and are 16 to 20 years old. So that's just with that part of the fleet, Rod, that's what we're trying to overcome. We're trying to get to that 10-year replacement cycle or 100,000, no more than 100,000 miles, recognizing it's fully depreciated in 5 years. We're trying to get to the point where we're managing that part of the fleet in that fashion. And $1.2 million, that's obviously a little over a quarter of that $4 million annual investment. So that's a big outlay. How many trucks should we really be buying each year? 8, twice as many as we have been. But we have so many other needs in the fleet, Rod, so we have to balance all of those expenditures and those investments. Does that help answer your question, at least as far as a heavy truck's concerned?
Sure. So that $4 million represents a combination of new equipment purchases and maintenance costs, right?
Only new equipment purchases. So you think of motor graders, think of front end loaders, think of pickup trucks, think of specialty equipment. Like last year, the board authorized new chip seal equipment. From the moment we take possession of it, it goes to work and it starts depreciating and deteriorating. The maintenance of the equipment's a different pot in the budget, in the operations budget.
Okay. All right. Thank
Okay.
you.
You're welcome.
And Jim, if I can add, the $4 million road equipment investments has only been the last few years. Prior to that, it's been maybe a couple of $1 million. There were even a few years when we were really struggling, where I believe it was 0.
It was 0.
Right. So we kind of dug ourselves a little bit of a hole, and we're trying to get out of that. Like Jim said, it probably should be closer to 8 million. Certainly the budget can't necessarily support it at this time. So 4 million will at least get us those 4 heavy trucks as well as some other equipment so we can try and catch up a little bit.
And the challenge is that this is an expense that never ends. The equipment deteriorates, depreciates, ages, it's maintained for its life, and then there's an economic reality where we need to part with it and get new equipment to have reliability in order to perform the job that we need to perform.
Barb, did you have a question? Another question? No, you're good? Okay. Any other questions? And Barb, I did want to mention, I always get a little nervous when I look at out years, because I think sometimes agencies, when they look at the out years, in particular, let's say they go 5 years into the future, a lot of times they'll take a sneak peek at it, and then they may not revisit it. Well, things are continually changing, and these numbers could look different in a couple months, 6 months from now. So I just want to caution everyone that, you know, that's what things look like right now, but you should continue to look at these out years and refine your numbers, because they will change. But sometimes I feel like organizations, they'll do a 5-year budget and say, okay, we're good, we're done, and not revisit that. And then when it finally is here, that year is here, they say, oh my gosh, you know, the numbers have really changed. So I just want to throw that out there too.
Well, and I've also noticed, if you want to call it climate change or whatever, but there are now rain events and ice events, and some pretty big snow events that I don't remember in decades past. So when you talk about not getting ahead of ourselves too much on these projections, I concur completely, because gosh, even just since I've joined the Road Commission, there seems to be a shift in what operations ends up having to handle in a given year, especially with the culverts and the bridges. With these rain events, it's just unpredictable and devastating in some of the unpaved roads.
Right. And, you know, another example was that 2012, the Dexter tornado. Our winter maintenance budget was doing great. And then the tornado happened in Dexter, and then all of our quote unquote savings from the winter went to the assistance there. So you never know. And you need to make sure it's just, you know, your fiduciary responsibility, if you will, to make sure that you have plenty of fund balance there to address all the things that you mentioned, Barb. Is there any other questions either about 2020 or the out years? Well, if not, I did want to acknowledge Matt and Jim and their departments. We all worked really hard, and you know, definitely a collaborative effort. Me sharing my tiny spreadsheets over Teams meetings, and them having the patience to decipher everything. And you know, what I like about how things work, working with the departments, I look at it one way, and say Matt or Jim looks at it a different way, and either we arrive at the same conclusion, or we have some healthy debate as far as what we think the numbers should be. And I appreciate all their efforts on getting this together, and you know, getting it to a point where we can present it to everyone.
If I may, I'd like to emphasize the second bullet of your current PowerPoint slide, that all pension and OPEB payments are included in these projections. We've made a commitment for many years now to make sure that we do right by our employees and contribute to those accounts. And I just want to be clear that we're not short shrifting in that area at all.
Yep, and Barb, also besides just the required payments that we have to make, we have the additional suggested amount to try to address our unfunded liabilities in you know, as best a way as we can. And that's great that we have all that included and still have that projected fund balance of 8.2.
And just building on what Dan said, what we've put in right now for the 2021 and 2022 projected budgets, are what we believe to be the priorities for the road commission. And they're the federal aid and non-federal aid projects that, that we've already discussed with the board. It is a commitment to our employees with respect to the pension and OPEB, not only the required payments, but the additional amounts that we've been putting in for the last few years, trying to chip away at those unfunded amounts that are in, or balances that exist. And then in addition, staying on top of our fleet. So these do include what we believe to be the priorities that in a perfect world, we would like to continue to fulfill these commitments across the board. We think it's a nice balance to the public with respect to both the projects and the equipment necessary to, you know, to maintain and stay on top of the road system itself. And that's also the commitment to our employees who are equally necessary in order to continue to provide the services to the public. That we believe are important to do so. So we're hoping to be able to continue with everything that we have programmed currently in 2021 and 2022. Dan and I sort of have an ongoing debate at times. He gets, you know, a little bit nervous. He doesn't want to make those projections, but I think it is important that we look and say, if we're continuing on this path, what does it look like? At least we think it'll look like today, and we will continue to monitor and to revisit this as we move forward.
I wanted to provide some additional feedback. One, compliments to Dan and his staff. We're blessed with having the level of expertise in our organization for budgeting, and also wanted to provide some feedback to the board. In the past, a few operations department staff would meet Dan in his office, and we'd have our pads of paper and information. Usually we'd leave with homework to do additional analysis and provide Dan with additional information. The investment that the board's made, the confidence that the board's had in us, in the technology, specifically the virtual environment, operations staff have found this to be extremely effective in the budget analysis. We don't need to huddle in Dan's office anymore. We can all be at our respective workstations and have access electronically to all of our information, our data, our records, and collaborate virtually with Microsoft Teams. And just really appreciate the board's investments and appreciate Dan and Chris's efforts and hard work to provide all these tools. We found that to be very effective in the second quarter budget review.
Yeah, I think we've come up with a new way of budgeting now, Jim, at least as far as the operations department. I think it worked quite well.
I think it's also a tribute to the staff at how quickly everyone has adapted to these unique circumstances. I mean, there were lots of opportunities for people to resist making the adjustments and the adaptations, and it sounds as though everybody's kind of, you know, put on their best, putting their best foot forward to make sure they take advantage to the fullest extent possible of how do we conduct business as usual in very unusual circumstances. So my compliments to all the staff on how well they've done since March 23rd.
Thank you very much for that. I think that the staff has been amazingly flexible under the circumstances. It's a very uncertain time for all of us, which most of us don't deal well with uncertainty and change and all those other things. But I do think that they've stepped up. I also think that we have found that there's new ways of doing business. So I guess some of those silver linings are we've got pushed into an environment that we weren't ready to go to quite yet, but we're there. And we've also found that there's certain services that we can deliver better now than we were previously. And I don't see us going back to business as usual. It'll be a new normal, whatever that looks like, when we can finally get to the point where we are doing a lot more in-person business. But all these tools that we've learned over time are wonderful, and I don't see us stepping away from them either. So I think they've added or complemented what we were already doing, and staff has really embraced them as we've been going through. So kudos to all of them.
Okay, are there any other questions on the budget?
Observation.
Yeah.
The PowerPoint that you put together, useful. Thank you. I'd like to do two things with it. One is make sure that it goes to each of the commissioners, as well as staff. I've suspect strongly already have a copy, but I don't know that the commissioners do. And in that, I'd like to see one addition to Barb's excellent point. The 2021 and 2022 projected fund balances, please, in writing on the PowerPoint, put down the percentage of reserves that those numbers represent, please.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, also include what Plant Moran's recommendation is, so that it's obvious that we're staying within those guidelines and being fiscally prudent.
Okay. Good point. Thank you, Barb. Dan, does that seem possible?
It does, and I take zero credit for the PowerPoint presentation. That all goes to Emily. The first virtual presentation I had, she suggested it. I'm not a huge fan of PowerPoint presentations, but once I put it together, I think it does a nice job of conveying things, again, without showing all my tiny spreadsheets on the various screens that you guys are looking at. So I think it does a nice job of summing things up. So kudos to Emily, and I appreciate the nudge to create these, and it does work well.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Sure. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just want to see if there's any other questions. And if there's not, the next steps would be, Cheryl, I believe the next board meeting, then we would have the suggested second quarter budget adjustments for approval. If anything were to change between this presentation and what we share with the board at the next board meeting, we would highlight those. Otherwise, it would be similar to what you've received today.
That's the meeting of August the 4th, not the one today.
August the 4th, correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I appreciate everybody's time. And as always, if there's any questions on the budget or any of our numbers, feel free to contact me anytime.
Cheryl, is it time to move on to the change in the use and external alteration of leased properties next door?
Yes. This topic I'm going to ask Jim to discuss. It really is to just bring the board up to speed with the fact that we have property on the north edge of our existing property that has been leased to the county. And that's where the county building sits, and that any changes or alterations to that facility do need to have our board's approval in order to move forward. So there's an item for you this afternoon on that very subject, but we thought it would be helpful just to have a little bit of information on what exactly that means, just to be able to put it in context. So I'd like Jim to share that information with you right now.
Emily, are you able to extend the ability for me to share a screen? I'd like to show a picture to the board. I think that'll help this brief discussion.
You should be able to share your screen, Jim.
Just 1 second. Screen 3. There we go. Share. I'm sharing my screen. On the left, I'm hoping you see a copy of the letter that's in your packet for this afternoon from Mr. Jason Fee, Infrastructure Manager for Washtenaw County. Do you see that letter?
Yep.
Okay. So this is the subject for this afternoon. And as Cheryl said, I just want to elaborate further. The ground lease that the Board of Road Commissioners and the Board of County Commissioners entered into July 1st of 2000 for the 6.5 acres on our property, just north of our administration building, that basically houses the Western Service Center, had certain terms and conditions. So any change in the use of those leased premises or alterations to the project, and that project was what was defined back in 2000, requires your consideration and your written approval. Over the years, I'll switch to aerial photo. This was taken this morning from our cell tower camera. And this is Zeb Road at the top of the page. This is the Western Service Center. This rectangle area that proceeds off the bottom of the page is roughly 6.5 acres of our property. Washtenaw County is a long-term tenant, a 50-year lease tenant of that property. And the board has granted approvals for alteration of the project and changes in use since 2000, specifically this storage barn, this small building here with the white roof for the toxic waste reclamation area, as examples. More recently, Sheriff Clayton's in the process of remodeling the basement of the Western Service Center and relocating the 911 dispatch and the emergency operations center in this basement. They'll be erecting an independent radio tower next to the building, putting in some additional generator capacity and some fencing. And the board did review and approve that previously, months ago. What's before you this afternoon would be, I'll switch back to this letter, specifically page 2, is the county, on behalf of the Washtenaw County Conservation District, is asking for your permission to erect a small wooden shed, roughly 8 feet by 12 feet, a utility shed. And it's for the Conservation District to put its hand tools and various small equipment that it uses for its functions. They would create a small limestone foundation area and then place the shed, the wooden shed on top of that. They're, just to get you oriented with Mr. Fee's picture, Zeeb Road is to the right of this upper picture. Here's the Scioto Township Hall, here's the Western Service Center, the large parking lot behind the Western Service Center, and then there's a gravel utility drive that goes back to our monopole that Verizon uses under lease agreement with us to access its facilities on the cell tower. North of that driveway, this is the first choice that the county would like to put this small wooden shed. Alternatively, they put it here. I'll switch to the current photo. So the first choice would be in this general area. The second choice would be between this plastic culvert pipe in this general area, adjacent to this gravel utility drive. And the condition that staff is suggesting to the board for this afternoon, that at no time would the use of this shed be allowed to impede the use of this driveway. This driveway access has to be maintained. I've reviewed this with the county personnel. I'm comfortable with it. I'm recommending, with the concurrence of the managing director, that the board grant the requested approval. And the nice thing about this, if the shed was ever in the way, it's something that can literally be picked up and relocated to a different spot. Does the board have any questions?
Where is the toxics drop off?
That's this area right here, Barb. You can see some of these barrels and other facilities right here. So the public would come in the driveway.
I'm not seeing your cursor.
I'm sorry. Are you seeing this red circle?
There we go. Okay.
There we go. That's the facility, and here are some of the containers that are used for that service.
This just seems really hodgepodge to me. It just feels.
I don't disagree. There are a number of uses in the Western Service Center. So primarily you've got Water Resource Commissioner Evan Pratt, and all of this pipe and this equipment is related to his office and his functions. You've got the reclamation area here, an outbuilding that Mr. Pratt has for some of the things that need to be enclosed. Sheriff Clayton has inquired in the past about the possibility of erecting a garage for his purposes out here in this grassed area to the west of the solar panel. Mr. Pratt has inquired about the same possibility. So it does feel a little hodgepodge, as you described. I think it's a nature of a variety of uses at this particular location. So county trying to collaborate and creatively put it all in here.
maybe it's just the aesthetic that bothers me, but you know, you look at this, it looks like a junkyard. Sorry, I don't like it. Whether they need to talk to each other and come up with a more comprehensive plan, maybe it's budget driven, I don't know. And I'm not going to stand in the way of one of those Costco tool shed things going up. But I really find this objectionable, that it's just like, oh, you know, let's plunk one more thing here and one more thing here. So having said that, I'll go with staff's recommendation for my vote today. But I find this really unappealing.
Thank you.
Jim, you said this is a portable shed, right?
It can be moved. Switching back to this, either one of these styles of shed could be relocated if that was necessary. It's not something that would have a fixed foundation where it couldn't readily be relocated if necessary.
Okay.
How much traffic is it going to be? Is it every day they're going to use it, or once a
I don't
week?
believe so. My conversation with the representatives from the county is that it would be infrequent, probably largely non-winter, again, to house hand shovels, rakes, various hand tools that the conservation district needs for its service. I think it's going to be infrequent.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any authority to insist that this be a little, I don't know what the word is, help me out here, Jim. I mean, I can see this proliferating, right? Oh, now we need a building for this, so we'll put up another 12 by 12, and oh, there's a spot in the lawn where we can stick one more thing.
Ultimately, the Board of Road Commissioners has authority subject to the terms and conditions of our lease. And I'm happy at the board's request to have a conversation with Mr. Fee and his staff about these concerns, and hopefully moving forward, this could be better organized, be more aesthetically appealing. But again, I think you've got a variety of interests here on this small 6.5 acres, most of which is hard surface and has buildings on it, but for this retention basin that's to the west below the bottom of this picture. This theoretically could be modified. The stormwater detention facilities could be redesigned, and theoretically this area could be used in a different way. But again, that would all have to be vetted and approved by the Board of Road Commissioners, by you.
Well, and I understand that the county is dealing with much more significant priorities than my concern. But if there's a way with a horizon that's out a little farther to move towards cleaning this up and making it look more planful, and I'd appreciate that. But right now they're in a crisis just like the rest of us. So it's just
there may be the opportunity to do exactly that. As Jim indicated, both the Water Resources Officer Evan, as well as the sheriff, have asked for different and potentially competing outbuildings or opportunities to put additional facilities in. So having a strategic plan of what this 6.5 acres would look like would be beneficial for everybody, because then can we accommodate one? Can we accommodate both? Do they have to somehow prioritize or learn to share, or whatever that might mean for them? But it's also an opportunity then to sort of clean everything up and say, if this was a little bit more organized, I mean, that's the unsaid part of it, then there'd be the ability to have more room to do the various functions that now we have competing interests that would be asking for.
Thank you.
Cheryl?
I have a question. You have indicated 2 red circles, the red circle on the opposite side of the driveway. is that part of the land that they lease from us, or is that onto not part of what they're leasing?
This would be part of the leased property. The shed would be located on the leased property
Okay.
at either location.
Okay.
Cheryl. Hello. Hello?
Yes.
There we go. Cheryl, something that has concerned me for some number of years, and since we're now talking about it, the area that the county recycling authority, whatever that correct name may be, is utilizing for the collection of hazardous household chemicals. To Barb's point that it's ratty looking back there, I don't like hazardous materials stored anywhere, and I don't think anybody does. They nevertheless have to be. But that particular facility has no containment, directability. In other words, if something's leaking over there, it's going to leak. And I would, as part of Jim's conversation with the county, I would like to see that particular item addressed. I would like to see everything that they're collecting undercover. I would like to see a containment plan for that facility so that when there is a leak, and there will be, that it does not go elsewhere. Sitting as it does now on the edge of an asphalt pad and partly on some more or less grass, isn't really a confinement for liquid waste or for any other kind of waste. So I'd like to see some conversation with the county about that particular potential disaster being contained.
Yeah, I'm not aware of what the specifications were that was built to, unless Jim knows off the top of his head, but we can certainly follow up and let you know
Right.
what the terms were when they would have had to have gotten permission from us to have constructed that in the first place.
Exactly.
So,
Happy to have that conversation
Like
with them.
moving forward.
Jim, I'm looking at, so the white building, and then you circled, is that the items that are going to fit in the shed that you circled there?
No, Joanne, that's the hazardous waste reclamation facility.
Oh, okay.
The shed would be the Washtenaw County Conservation District office and located on the north side of this gravel driveway or the south side, one of those two locations.
So
Go
where
ahead.
do they store their stuff now?
I don't know.
Oh,
I think they really don't have a good place. As I understand it from Mr. Fee and his staff, they don't have a good place. It's probably, this is an opportunity for them, I think, to consolidate it on a secure property and in a secure fashion.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioners, are we ready to move on to the next agenda item? Hello?
Yes.
Okay,
No
thank you.
objection. No objection.
Thank you. I need a motion to move into closed session for participation in meetings.
I move that we enter a closed session to discuss remote participation related to the Open Meetings Act and the potential property disposition of a parcel in Sharon Township.
I support.
It's been moved and supported. That will require, a roll call vote. Commissioner Barb Fuller, aye or nay?
Yes.
Commissioner Rod Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Gloria Yamas,
Yes.
Commissioner Joanne McCollum,
Yes.
and Doug Fuller votes yes as well. We are now in a, if there's not anything that the rest of the board, that members of the board would like to bring forward, then I suggest that we adjourn. Entertain that motion.
So moved.
It's been moved. Can I have a second?
Support.
Commissioner Fuller.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Yamas.
Yes.
Commissioner McCollum.
Yes.
And Commissioner Fuller, Doug votes yes as well. We are adjourned, and I thank you all.